our staff, this great group of people that I get to work with every week. And some people ask me, like, you work a full-time job and then you have the church, which is part-time, whatever that means, right? Why do you do it? And I have to tell you, this place means so much to me, each and every one of you. So I'm so grateful to be able to do this as long as I can do this for you in this congregation. Since we're talking about being vulnerable, I decided to share a little more piece of something that you may not know about me. So hopefully this won't taint your opinion of me going forward. And sometimes people ask me, what is your favorite book, as I talk about books that I'm reading. And often I talk about books that I'm reading as if they're my favorite book. So whatever book that I'm in the middle of or about to finish, I might say, this is the best book I've ever read. And it really isn't. But it's just the one I'm reading at the time, and so I'm excited about it. But if you pinned me down and said, what is your favorite book, a book that you've read probably more than 100 times since you were in your college days, what is that one book that you cherish and is probably the most inspiring thing you've ever read? The answer to that, surprisingly enough, would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. How's that? High or bad? There are so many reasons that I won't get into, but the amazing way that she wrote the inner thoughts of both Victor Frankenstein, the creator of the creature, but also the inner thoughts of this creature that just all of a sudden appeared in the world and was trying to figure out what it meant to be alive. The way she dealt with writing from the perspective of those male voices and the interior pain and struggle of what it means for them. The way she dealt with the questions of our deepest existence and philosophical questions, the way she dealt with feminist issues in the text, and maybe even more impressive, the way she wrote the story to begin with, because the story is that she and her husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and their good friend, Lord Byron the poet, were vacationing together, and they decided to have a challenge and say, let's take the night, spend it alone from each other, and write a story, and we'll come back in the morning and share a story that maybe we can start to work with and play with and enjoy together. In one night, she wrote almost the entire text of Frankenstein and brought it back the next day. She named it The Modern Prometheus, and then her husband added the title Frankenstein that he thought would work, and he often says that was really my only contribution to this text. So, don't really have a lot of relevance there, I just wanted to share that. Sorry about that. All right, on to our topic. Mary Wollstonecraft. I was so wrong about her years. When I was introducing her opening words, I was getting her time frame mixed up with Olympia Brown. But she was born in 1759 in London. The Wollstonecraft family had great wealth. Her father wasn't good at keeping great wealth. And so he lost everything through different means. She had an older brother, and so they only had the finances for one of them to be educated, and since her older brother was favored, he is the one that received the education, the formal education. Mary was self-taught and read books on her own and actually talked to people, talked to adults even as a little kid, and learned so much in dialogue. She talked so much and shared so many opinions that her mother developed a practice that she needed to do when people were over visiting. She said that you have to sit for 3 to 4 hours in silence while people are here. Mary said that is excruciating. When you want to talk and you hear the conversations and you have so much that you're reading and so much that you want to share, but with strict punishment if she had done otherwise. Her mother made her sit in silence. So now you hear it differently, right? When she writes her text and says, I will not sit in silence. I will not silence my voice. I won't even make it quiet, because it might come across as just whining. So I'm going to be firm with my voice. In her early adulthood, she began writing stories. She wrote a story called Mary, which is about one of her friends that died. She wrote a song called Maria, which most people believe is really kind of autobiographical. It's about an older brother that received all the attention and was a bit of the tyrant in the home. It's called Maria, The Wrongs of Woman. It's a very painful but beautiful text to read of Mary Wollstonecraft. With all of the struggle with finances, she also, in that time frame, wasn't able to be what's called marriable. And she had limited professional prospects. And so she decided writing was her avenue for self-support, her avenue out, her avenue away from her family. And so she decided to pursue this new career in writing. She studied French, she studied German so that she could write in multiple different languages and text. She wrote reviews. Anything that was being written, she would write a review of that text. She would see different thinkers and things that were being proposed, and you can imagine in the late 1700s there was a lot of things being written, particularly around the French Revolution and, of course, what was happening here as well. She published after she was so enraged by Edmund Burke's conservative critique of the French Revolution. She published a text called The Vindication of the Rights of Men in 1790, attacked the aristocracy, defended democracy and republicanism. This work made her instantly well known, and then 2 years later, she wrote the text that I quoted from earlier, which was called, in 1792, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. In this text, she applied her ardent feminism, and if you study feminist history, really they see this is the beginning of modern feminist movement. She brought feminism in and called for freedom, reason, education, and it didn't matter regardless of the gender. She argued that moral and civil interests of humankind, love can only develop from which an orderly train of virtues spring, and education was central to these virtues. But for her, she saw that education for women at the present shut her out and many women like her from such investigations into that. She argues that moralists have universally agreed that unless virtue be nursed by liberty, it can never be attained. And what they say of man, I extend to all of humankind, men and women, insisting that being cannot be considered rational or virtuous who obeys any external authority, but that of their own individual reasoning. It may not sound like a lot, but that is a powerful statement. In essence, she says, the only way to be rational and virtuous as a human being is not to obey an external authority in the sky or from a pulpit, she said, but to only obey your internal, individual reasoning. Everybody said, well, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And if you ever want to read a great biography, Lyndall Gordon wrote a beautiful biography of Mary Wollstonecraft and named it Vindication. And he says in this text that this will be a story of an independent and compassionate woman who devised a blueprint for human change and held it through the terror and private trials and passed it on to her future generations. I am going to be the first of a new genus, Mary Wollstonecraft told her sister Everina. The peculiar bent of my nature is pushing me on. It is the early feminist text that really outlines her career on top of all the other things that she wrote. She addressed pamphlets that are written in French. She addressed pamphlets that talk about the revolutions that are happening. She engages the philosophy of the time, particularly the work of Rousseau, and challenges so many things about his writing, debasing stereotypes, criticizing the concept of women having rules of decorum. She examines feminine ideas of modesty, chastity, and virtue. She argues that women are only expected to appear modest and chaste only to preserve their good reputation, and they only preserve their good reputation in order to secure the insecure reputation of men, and that true modesty can only be attained by acquiring an intelligent mind. She suggests that a woman's only means to elevate her standing, which is marriage, became principally concerned with only acquiring these pleasing and vain attributes that it can attract someone, and therefore they're not the substantive qualities that can really help women rise up. She explores the debasement of women, and in much the same way, she says that marriage teaches women to be completely, unconditionally obedient to a person, which at the same time is what they were trying to do in the revolution, which is to squash the revolution by getting all people to have unconditional obedience to a tyrannical ruler. And therefore she says, I'm not going to participate in that. As a matter of fact, in great 1790 language, she says, that's not true. Gives a big paragraph of Rousseau that she quotes, and I don't know if you know the philosopher Rousseau, but he was kind of up here on the time frame, and she just writes this long, beautiful philosophical quote by Rousseau, and she just says, that's not true. She brings her argument in this text to a close by providing a solution that she says will be the issue that will bring all society's problems to an end, that we reform the education system and we replace it with free public education where girls and boys are educated alongside one another. She suggests that this change will enable women to acquire independence from men and expand their minds and change the relationships in all human beings. And in the final chapter, she says we should also let that diverse group of people be the one who come up with the curriculum that you teach, and not just teach the white man's history. 1700s. She married an English journalist and political philosopher, William Godwin. Godwin is much of the reason why we have so much information about Mary Wollstonecraft, because he wrote so much in his memoirs about her. They were married less than a year, but we'll talk about that later. But they met at the home of their publisher. Joseph Johnson was the publisher for both of them. And they were hosting, Joseph Johnson was hosting a dinner for one of his authors of the time. You might recognize this name, Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was there to read some of his works, and Godwin reflected in his memoirs later that on that night he went to hear the wonderful voice of Thomas Paine and ended up hearing too little of Paine and too much of Mary Wollstonecraft. And from that day on, he fell in love. They married, and she became pregnant with a child, and she gave birth to a daughter that they decided to name after her. They named her Mary. 10 days later, Mary Wollstonecraft died from sepsis that was acquired during childbirth. Her daughter Mary only knew her, as she said, through her writings and her words. Beautifully, the way Mary says this, her daughter reached off the pages and shaped her as a woman. The Mary that I'm referring to is Mary Shelley, that wrote Frankenstein. See, it was connected. An amazing text from a woman that was shaped by a ghost. Her mother that poured herself into her writings and therefore paved the way for this beautiful woman and generations to come to be transformed. That's the message of Women's History Month, right? That we are standing on the shoulders of some extraordinary women in history who reach out across the expanse of time and they shape who we are today. They stand as fortresses that will not be shaken by the pathetic, insecure storms that huff and puff and blow a lot of wind and hate and contempt for DEI and clouds that try to undermine being awake and aware and progressive and just. These fortresses will not be silenced. Mary Wollstonecraft said, "I will not silence my voice." And because of that, because of her willingness to deal with criticism, deal with her own despair as she looked around her world, and keep writing and keep getting her message out there, people today still pick up her writings and her hands reach out across the pages and shape us even today. I've read her book, Vindication for the Rights of Women, many times. I decided to listen to an audible version of it, a beautiful narration of that. And driving back and forth to Greenville over the past couple of weeks, I was feeling that what Mary Shelley said. This woman is reaching out across the pages of history and shaping me. This is why we can't, here at the UUCC, choose the path of fear. We can't choose the path of silence. We must speak to justice. We must demonstrate the power of love. We must trust our strength and what we have built in the face of the huffing and the puffing of all tyrants. We are not only saving ourselves, but we're making our world great today and preserving a future for generations to come. So may we find that ability to trust our good work and not let our voices be silenced.
Our closing hymn is probably very familiar, very special to our UU tradition, Spirit of Life by Carolyn McDade. Carolyn McDade made multiple contributions to our UU hymnals. She herself does not describe herself as a Unitarian Universalist, though. She's a songwriter, spiritual feminist, social activist. And she says she's a lover of language and sound, a songwriter committed to the power of singing in personal and social transformation. Her songs are sung widely in the U.S. and Canada and weave together personal integrity, social vision, and planetary wholeness. For decades, she's gathered together circles of women to sing and reflect on life. She believes in letting her songs go out and have their own lives, and is happy that her songs have found a home in our UU hymnals. I'll tell you briefly, though, the story behind this very loved hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. Carolyn McDade was at a meeting, an event for Central American Solidarity with an activist group she worked with in the early 80s. And she was feeling very stressed and very overwhelmed and rode home from the meeting with a dear friend named Pat. She said, when I got to Pat's house, I told her, I feel like a piece of dried cardboard that has lain in the attic for years. Just open wide the door and I'll be dust. She said I was tired, not with my community, but with the world. And her friend Pat sat with her, and she loved her for sitting with her. McDade rode home, walked through her house in the dark, found her piano, and wrote Spirit of Life, which she herself calls a prayer. Her prayer was, may I not drop out. She says the song was not written, but prayed, and she knew more than anything that she wanted to continue in faith with the movement. Please rise in body or spirit to join me in singing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
For our closing words, just want to share some words of Mary Safford, who is a Unitarian minister, ordained just 10 years after Olympia Brown, that I mentioned during our Story for All Ages. Mary Safford writes, a poem, a song, a hope for all who seek for thee, the home of faith in all things true, a faith that seeks the larger view, the home of love that yearns to bless, the home of truth and righteousness. Long may it stand, the outward sign of that indwelling love divine.
And as we join in singing our congregational benediction, may we also hold a spirit of celebration for the many women here at the UUCC that are part of our history. When we sing this benediction, music written by Sharon Matchett.
All right, do we have any announcements, Melody? Yeah, we have one, quickly.
Quickly, just to remind you that the Social Action Committee and the Green Sanctuary team will be meeting in room 10 starting at about 12:30.
Thank you, Sharon. All right, you heard from Chuck that there's cake back there, right? To help commemorate the life of her dear dad. So thank you for being here today. If you're visiting with us, we invite you to stick around, give us a chance to get to know you and a chance for you to get to know us as a congregation as well, even more. Thank you all for being here.